on to have a quick chat about today's events with the Dan Andrews inquiry, or the hotel quarantine inquiry. Dan Andrews' turn. Um, interesting day. The I watched the whole thing and had it running on my page, and it's interesting to see the line of questioning, the way it was done, the way that the lady asked it. It sounded like she was leading. There was a lot of leading questions that he could just answer with yes or no. And then as she got a bit further into it, she actually started to drill into him quite a bit. And it was really interesting to hear what came from it. The things that I wrote down. So it was the hotels. She was asking why he chose to do hotels rather than home quarantine. And she kept on pushing towards the fact that he had a $30 million contract that he was putting out there for the hotels. And that money went to a private security company. She didn't really drill into it, but she was putting it out there for people to be aware of what was happening there. Now, even in June, July, when he flicked it around and started taking on more advice, he then went to the prison wards. So he was using them instead. So another contract that got done through them when he was being offered ADF the whole time. And yeah, there was nothing that came from that at all. And people are saying that they think it was just a performance and it wasn't like a real thing or whatever. So yeah, it was really an interesting thing. So then I was going to say after that, he mentioned that it was unprecedented times. So they came up with they couldn't really plan it out because it was unprecedented times. But then at the same time, he said he had quality staff that were experienced, that he knew that he could rely on. Outside of that, he then spoke about the private security company. She was asking him, they had no experience in PPE or controlling of a virus. And he sort of said, not to my knowledge. And then the next thing she went down into was that in 2018, he actually ran an inquiry into private security that found out that they use casuals and contractors. They bad English and bad numeracy involved in what they do. Now, the one thing they didn't mention at all was that he paid for it was someone he knew through a friend, I think it was, that they got the private that they adopted the private security company from. But, all of this is slightly a distraction. But what this did was show that they are not accountable for anything. So he did not step up at all and say anything. So the chances are that this could go to a Royal Commission next. So we're going to have to watch and see what happens. So the documents showed that the ADF was offered, and his different ministers are saying that it was offered, but he's saying it wasn't. So straight out lies, because it was there in writing and he still said no. It showed the DHHS and the ministers there wasn't a proper branch that came down, that they weren't communicating between the chief health officer, the ministers, and DHHS, which you already knew. It's just a shit fight in there. He said he called the inquiry to find out who hired the private security company. But when you're the top, when you're the premier that's the top of the whole thing, then that means that you should be accountable for everything that happens. If I was the boss at my work and I sat there and said, I do not recall this, I do not recall that, I would get fired. I would be gone. And the problem is that we need someone to do that. So it's really interesting as well. No one's held accountable is what they said, but he did point his finger towards Health Minister Jenny Mikakos, and he was setting that up over the last couple of days. So it did mention the letters that got sent from the ADF offering ADF help, and he said that he didn't know anything about it. But then they were saying, but you were in the National Cabinet. He said National Cabinet didn't offer ADF, and then the other guys offered ADF, but it never got back to him. But he's the boss, so he should know what all the ministers are doing, really. It comes back to him. Liability goes back to the boss of a company when something goes wrong. And he's got blood on his hands, because if this virus is real like they say it is, and this is what they're trying to put out there, he's the one who allowed it to escape from the hotel quarantine by having private security work in there that didn't know how to use PPE. So if that's the path he wants to go down, then he's accountable. If he says that the virus isn't real, then he's accountable. He can't win here, no matter what. So we know this. All of us know this. We understand, we know it, 100%. he was just continuing to try and pass the buck. He even tried to pass it on to the private security company, and their lawyer stood up and said, wait a second, who signed the contract? Like, where was the contract signed? It had to have been signed by someone. It can't just be handballed to everywhere. So it's actually a ridiculous thing to watch. It was good to see him squirm. He then put out a apology, but the apology wasn't sincere at all. And the reason it wasn't sincere is because he's still taking no accountability and trying to blame everyone else, and everyone else is taking no accountability by all of them saying, I do not recall. Someone signed the paperwork, and he's the boss. So if we're in a democratic society, he's gone. The government's gone, because you can't have a government with a pandemic where no one in the government's taking accountability. So that's where it sits right now. You've got a government that takes no accountability for a virus that supposedly killed 700 plus Victorians, and all of them are saying, I don't know who did it. So either you dissolve the whole parliament, or you realize that the whole thing's a scam and you let it go. Like, no matter what, the parliament has to go. No matter what, the government's gone. It has to be. If we're living in a democratic society, it has to be gone. There's no other answer to it. Okay, guys, I'm going to run. I'm going to get across to my Instagram. And when I get over there, hopefully some of you guys are there. I'm going to a guy coming on talking about a bit of spiritual stuff as well to help people. So, peace.